August 12, 1985, a Boeing 747 lifts off from Tokyo, carrying 524 people. But within just 12 minutes, a hidden flaw buried deep inside its tail erupts with explosive force. The aircraft begins to twist, shake, and fall out of control. Passengers feel the cabin pressure drop, the plane jerking violently as the pilots fight the impossible. A jumbo jet with no working controls. What follows is the longest, most terrifying 32 minutes in aviation history, and the single deadliest crash involving one aircraft. This is the haunting story of Japan Airlines Flight 123. Japan Airlines Flight 123 was a scheduled domestic passenger flight from Tokyo to Osaka, Japan. On the evening of Monday, the 12th of August 1985, the Boeing 747 flying the route suffered a severe structural failure and explosive decompression. 12 minutes after takeoff, after flying under minimal control for 32 minutes, the plane crashed in the area of Mount Takamagara, 100 kilometers from Tokyo. The aircraft, featuring a high-density seating configuration, was carrying 524 people. The crash killed all 15 crew members and 505 of the 509 passengers on board, leaving only 4 survivors. An estimated 20 to 50 passengers survived the initial crash, but died from their injuries while awaiting rescue. The crash is the deadliest single aircraft accident in aviation history and remains the deadliest aviation incident in Japan. Japan's Aircraft Accident Investigation Commission, assisted by the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, concluded that the structural failure was caused by a faulty repair by Boeing technicians following a tail strike 7 years earlier. When the faulty repair eventually failed, it resulted in a rapid decompression that ripped off a large portion of the tail and caused the loss of function of all hydraulic systems and flight controls. The Boeing 747 was built and delivered to Japan Airlines in 1974. It had accumulated slightly more than 25,000 flight hours. On the 2nd of June 1978, while operating Japan Airlines Flight 115 along the same route, JA8119 bounced heavily on landing while carrying out an instrument approach to runway 32L at Itami Airport. The pilot then excessively flared the aircraft, causing a severe tailstrike on the second touchdown. Of the 394 people on board, 25 sustained injuries, 23 minor and 2 serious. The tailstrike cracked open the aft pressure bulkhead. The damage was repaired by Boeing technicians, and the aircraft was returned to service. The aircraft had flown for 8,830 hours at the time. At the time of the accident, the aircraft was on the 5th of its 6 planned flights of the day. The flight had 15 crew members, consisting of 3 cockpit crew and 12 cabin crew. The cockpit crew consisted of Captain Masami Takahama, aged 49, served as a training instructor for First Officer Yutaka Sasaki on the flight, supervising him while handling the radio communications, and also acting as First Officer. Takahama was a veteran pilot, having logged about 12,424 flight hours, including about 4,842 hours in 747s. First Officer Yutaka Sasaki, age 39, was undergoing training for promotion to captain and flew Flight 123 as one of his final training evaluation flights, acting as captain. He had logged about 3,963 flight hours, including about 2,665 hours in 747s. Flight engineer Hiroshi Fukuda, age 46, was a veteran flight engineer having logged about 9,831 flight hours, including about 3,846 hours in 747s. In 1987, when the investigation concluded, all 3 cockpit crew members were posthumously awarded the Polaris Award. The flight was during the Obon holiday period, when many Japanese people make trips to their hometowns or to resorts. 22 non-Japanese were on board the flight, including 4 residents of Hong Kong, 2 from Italy, and 6 from the United States, and 1 each from West Germany and the United Kingdom. Some ostensible foreigners had dual nationality, and some of them were residents of Japan. The 4 survivors, all female, were seated on the left side and toward the middle of seat rows 54 to 60 in the rear of the aircraft. They were Yumi Oshii, a Japan Airlines off-duty flight attendant, Hiroko and Mikiko Yoshizaki, a mother and her 8-year-old daughter who both lost their loved ones in the crash, and Keiko Kawakami, a 12-year-old girl who also lost her parents and sister in the crash. Among the victims were Japanese singer and actor Kyu Sakamoto, and banker Akihisa Yukawa, the father to be a violinist and composer Diana Yukawa. Born a month after the accident, The aircraft landed as JL-366 at Haneda Airport in TTA, Tokyo, Japan, from Fukuoka Airport at 5:12 p.m., after almost an hour on the ground. Flight 123 pushed back from Gate 18 at 6:04 p.m. and took off from runway 15L at 6:12 p.m., 12 minutes behind schedule, 12 minutes after takeoff at 6:24 p.m. At near cruising altitude over Sagami Bay, 5.6 kilometers east of Higashizu, Shizuoka, the aircraft underwent explosive decompression, bringing down the ceiling around the rear lavatories, damaging the unpressurized fuselage aft of the plane, unseating the vertical stabilizer, and severing all 4 hydraulic lines. A photograph taken from the ground shows the vertical stabilizer missing. The pilots set their transponder to broadcast a distress signal. Captain Takahama contacted Tokyo Area Control Center to declare an emergency and request a return to Haneda Airport, descending and following emergency landing vectors to Oshima. Tokyo Control approved a right-hand turn to a heading of 90 degrees, back toward Oshima, and the aircraft entered an initial right-hand bank of 40 degrees, several degrees greater than observed previously. Captain Takahama ordered First Officer Sasaki to reduce the bank angle, and expressed confusion when the aircraft did not respond to the control wheel being turned left. The flight engineer reported that hydraulic pressure was dropping. The captain repeated the order to reduce the bank angle, as the autopilot had disengaged. He ordered the first officer to bank it back, then ordered him to pull up. None of these attempted maneuvers produced a response. The pilots realized the aircraft had become virtually uncontrollable, and Captain Takahama ordered the co-pilot to descend. After suffering a catastrophic decompression, Japan Airlines Flight 123 turned back toward the Japanese mainland around 6:26 p.m., but remained unable to properly control its direction. Tokyo Air Traffic Control repeatedly instructed the crew to descend and turn toward Oshima, but communication was slow and confused. By 6:31 p.m., the captain reported that the aircraft had become uncontrollable. Unknown to the crew at first, the aircraft had suffered a complete loss of hydraulic pressure due to the destruction of the vertical stabilizer, leaving all primary flight controls inoperative. With no hydraulic control, the Boeing 747 entered dangerous phugoid oscillations, repeatedly climbing and descending, while also experiencing Dutch roll, a violent side-to-side yaw and roll. The pilots continued attempting manual control, but the aircraft responded only through changes in engine thrust. Compounding the crisis, the aircraft was unpressurized at high altitude, and the crew showed clear signs of hypoxia, including confusion and delayed responses. Despite repeated suggestions from the flight engineer, none of the pilots put on their oxygen masks. By around 6:40 p.m., the crew briefly achieved limited control using differential engine thrust, reducing the severity of the oscillations. They deployed the landing gear using the emergency system in an attempt to stabilize the aircraft further, which helped dampen some motion but also reduced directional control. As thrust settings became uneven, the aircraft entered wide looping turns while slowly descending. At lower altitudes, communication improved slightly as oxygen levels increased, and the captain openly acknowledged the severity of the situation, stating, "This may be hopeless." Between 6:48 and 6:55 p.m., the aircraft descended toward mountainous terrain west of Tokyo. Repeated power changes intended to avoid terrain instead intensified the oscillations. Emergency flap extensions were attempted using alternate electrical systems, but asymmetric flap and engine thrust settings caused the aircraft to roll sharply to the right. Despite full engine power and desperate attempts to recover, the aircraft entered an unrecoverable right-hand descent, triggering ground proximity warnings in the final moments. At 6:56 p.m., still banking steeply to the right, the aircraft struck a mountain ridge near Mount Takamagara. The right wing and engines were torn away, and the aircraft flipped and exploded upon impact. Seismic instruments later confirmed the timing of the crash. In total, 32 minutes elapsed between the initial structural failure and the final impact, marking the deadliest single aircraft accident in aviation history. Japan's Aircraft Accident Investigation Commission published their final report on the accident on the 19th of June 1987. The official cause of the crash, according to the investigation, was the aircraft was involved in a tailstrike incident at Osaka International Airport 7 years earlier as YAL Flight 115, which damaged the aircraft's aft pressure bulkhead. The subsequent repair of the bulkhead did not conform to Boeing's approved repair methods. For reinforcing a damaged bulkhead, Boeing's repair procedure calls for one continuous splice plate with 3 rows of rivets. The Boeing repair technicians, however, had used to splice plates parallel to the stress crack. Cutting the plate in this manner negated the effectiveness of the row of rivets, reducing the part's resistance to fatigue, cracking to about 70% of that for a correct repair. The post-repair inspection by JAL did not discover the defect, as it was covered by overlapping plates. During the investigation, the Accident Investigation Commission calculated that this incorrect installation would fail after about 11,000 pressurization cycles. The aircraft accomplished 12,318 successful flights from the time that the faulty repair was made to when the crash happened. Consequently, after repeated pressurization cycles during normal flight, the bulkhead gradually started to crack near the row of rivets holding it together. When it finally failed, the resulting rapid decompression ruptured the lines of all 4 hydraulic systems and ejected the vertical stabilizer. With many of the aircraft's flight controls disabled, the aircraft became uncontrollable. The loss of Japan Airlines Flight 123 in 1985 marked one of the darkest chapters in aviation history. In the aftermath, investigators painstakingly reconstructed the chain of events, revealing how a single improper repair years earlier led to a catastrophic structural failure. The tragedy claimed 520 lives and left an indelible mark on Japan and the global aviation community. Beyond the numbers, Flight 123 became a solemn reminder that aviation safety is built on countless decisions made long before an aircraft ever leaves the runway. From this disaster came hard-earned lessons that reshaped the industry. Maintenance procedures were tightened worldwide, inspection standards were strengthened, and the importance of clear documentation and oversight was reinforced at every level. Human factors, organizational responsibility, and long-term accountability became central themes in aviation safety culture. Flight 123 ensured that future accidents would be prevented not by chance, but by learning relentlessly and honestly from the past. For more in-depth aviation stories and the lessons hidden inside every cockpit voice recording, subscribe to the Black Box Series channel.